Okay, so Tottenham Hotspur and squad depth. So we've had the first preseason game now, win against Reading. Always a little bit of a difficult thing to do, getting anything much from these first preseason games, particularly against lower league oppositions. But with Thomas Frank coming in, it actually gives us quite a lot of information about what he probably intends to do tactically. So we can have a look at that. So what I really want to do today is think about the squad depth. Now, obviously, injuries have been a big problem the last couple of seasons. Really affected results. Really affected who we had available and who ended up playing, and directly affecting the results. So we're going to look at three things today. We're going to look at the tactics that we used in the Reading match. Just quickly, like I say, it's just an indicator of how we think players are going to be used. Then we're going to have a little look at the depth chart, think about who will be where, and we're going to have a little look at the Champions League registration part of that because I think that is important because it shows who's going to be, I guess, prioritised. And then finally, we're going to do the important bit, which is the injury stress test. So what we're going to do is go through a couple of different scenarios with different people getting injured and different combinations of people getting injured and see how we think Thomas Frank might respond to that, which hopefully will give us an indicator as to how good the squad depth is this year. Because I think that's going to be very important trying to stay in all the different competitions. So yeah, stick around and we'll work this through. Cool. So let's have a quick look at the tactics from the Reading game. We've got the average position map here, and I don't think that there was much of a surprise when we saw this at all. So Thomas Frank using the 4-2-3-1 that he was using last year at Brentford. So instead of seeing a single pivot, the first change that we were noticing was a double pivot. It was Bentancur and Starr. He started two different 11s in both halves. But I think this is the way he's going to go forward. And I think that provided a lot of stability. So the goalkeeper seemed to have a lot more options when he was in possession. And we seem to just have a lot more of a stable base. I don't think we were asking too much of either of the sort of central midfielders. And I think that when we did lose possession, having those players around and the fullbacks not too high up was really creating a kind of a much more secure base. Basically, there was a lot more players around if something bad did happen, but we had plenty of people to be able to make our way forward up pitch. The main thing that's kind of sticking out to me, I think, is again, not surprisingly, was we've got Mikey Moore starting here on the left wing, and he's sort of inside of Destiny Udogie there. So very much like he was using Keane Lewis Potter and Kevin Schade last year. The left fullback was very much playing like a winger. He was keeping the width of that touchline. The left winger coming in like an inside forward. And then the back three was kind of shifting over. So you can see that Kevin Danso was doing a lot of his work on the left. Romero into the middle, where I thought he really excelled. I think that plays so much to his strengths. It's going to be a really good thing if we can keep him around. And then Pedro Porro was tucking in, so you can see that compared to the sort of heat maps, if you go and look at them from last season, we can see that Pedro Porro is much more in his is in his own half, but then his attacking zones are more up the wing. But we can see that he is taking that kind of like right quarterback slot kind of thing where he can put some balls in from deep. And then you've got the central attacking midfielder. In this half, that was Alfie Devine. Second half, it was Jamie Donnelly playing it slightly different. But I think what we saw here again, it's very much like the Mikkel Dansgaard type thing. And then you've got Brennan Johnson, who was wider than I thought he was going to be. I thought he was going to be playing a little bit more like Mbumo, but he was wider than I thought he was. But he was not trying to get down to the touchline. I don't think it was that same touchline winger. I just think he's getting used to the start of that role. And then Dom Solanke playing very much like a number 9 doing what he's doing. So yes, no real surprises, but I think the way we can think about the squad depth is thinking about how will Thomas Frank, if we see that as the starting position for him, what players can he put where, and who can potentially fit into other roles if they were to need to. So let's have a look at that. Right, so let's have a look at that on the whiteboard. So we've got the players here in a 4-2-3-1. Let's start off at the back. So we've got Vic, Kinski, Austin, and Keeley. Keeley's been transferred out, potentially playing against Luton this weekend in the friendly, and then at the centre back spots, looks like we've got quite a lot of depth. A little bit weird. So we've got Romero, Danso, Dragusin, Takai, Phillips, Dorrington. I've got going back on loan. That's been confirmed. And then on the left spot, we've got Van de Ven and Vuskovic. Now, I could potentially just put everyone there on the right-hand side. And I don't think Thomas Frank is going to be too scared about playing right-footed players on the left-hand side. If they're the next best central defender, I think that's who's going to go there. We saw Danso playing there on Saturday against Reading, and he did fine. So I don't think that we have to really worry a little bit too much. So, for example, Vuskovic can obviously use that left foot, but he played on the right-hand side. So, like I said, I don't think Thomas Frank is going to worry too much about right-left footers. Maybe the first kind of controversial bit here about this depth chart will be Ben Davies being at left back. I had him there before last weekend, and that's where we saw him play last weekend. Now, I don't think that's too much of a problem at all. One, I think that he fits into that Aya kind of role that Thomas Frank used in Brentford last year. He doesn't always need his fullbacks to be sort of traditional fullbacks or even attacking fullbacks. He will use attacking fullbacks and he will have them going on the overlap, but there's a lot of times that he will use a centre back there or someone who essentially plays as a right or left centre back there. Okay, so the two central midfield roles, we've got Bentancur and Bergvall. Sarr obviously started ahead. After the end of last season, I still think Bergvall's very much the better player there. I think Bentancur looked pretty good. He wasn't being asked to do a lot of the stuff he, I think, was finding hard as that single pivot last year. And I also think that Basuma can actually fit into that. I went back and had a look at some of the last games that he was playing for Brighton before he sort of came into Tottenham, and he was playing in a double pivot there next to Moise Caicedo. So I think maybe the fact that we've got the double pivot there is actually playing to the strengths of some of the players, and I think that might start clouding what kind of profile do you need to come in? Do you need a João Paulinho as a defensive midfielder, or actually are the players that we've got good at both types of things? They can play the defensive role, but not on their own, and they can also get forward and pass the ball when they need to. So not too much of an order here. I'm not expecting Basuma to be around, but if he was to leave, I can see him being replaced. I've got Bergvall ahead of Sarr, and then I very much think that Archie Gray is going to be thought of as a midfielder here, but obviously he can provide cover for the right back role as well. So then on to the central midfielders. So here I've got Maddison. I had Gibbs White. I put that on when I thought this was a done deal. And then Donnelly and Devine. So if we kind of leave Gibbs White out of it for now, if he's there, he's obviously in that slot, but we don't know what's going to happen with it. With Jamie Donnelly and Alfie Devine. So I had put Donnelly on here before the game on Saturday. I saw Devine obviously starting the game. But Jamie Donnelly, I think, just looks more of a threat, I think, when he gets onto the ball. Jamie Donnelly can also provide cover as a striker if you were to need him to. So I think he had the stronger loan. I think he didn't necessarily have much more of a stronger game. But like I say, you can't base too much on one preseason game. So at the minute, I would say you've got Donnelly ahead of time. Then if we do left wingers, so Son, Tell, Solomon, Moore, Yang, and Hill. Hill is going to be going there, slashing his transfer price. Yang I very much expect to go out on loan, and then I've got Solomon ahead of Moore. I think just if you were going to have to play someone, say in the Champions League, you're probably playing Solomon at the minute. But I again expect Solomon to be sold. And I think when we go into some of the Champions League ramifications, we can kind of work through that. But yeah, Son and Tel as the first two options there. And then on the right wing, I've got Kudus ahead of Johnson. I thought he had a really good start. Johnson, not so much. I think he's probably going to benefit from that role, but I think he's going to have to get used to it. I've got Cooley third. I think he would probably be um, uh, competing for the starting right wing role against both Kudus and Johnson. It's just I think that injury is going to take a really long time to heal. And then at the bottom we've got Wilson Odobert. Haven't seen him yet in pre-season. Potentially we could see him going out on loan. As the strikers, I've got Solanke, Ritchie, Scarlett, and Lanarkshire. Lanarkshire obviously had that goal. I think he's really got something about him. And I think I might have to reverse this bit that we've got here. So I think Dane Scarlett is probably going to get sold. If not, he's going to go out on loan. If they were going to keep someone around as a third option, and that's either going to be behind Rishi or if they sell him and bring in someone else. I know there's rumours about Wissa, but yeah. So that's the look at the Champions League registration side of it. Now, I don't think this is necessarily just about the Champions League. The Champions League registration is a lot more strict than the Premier League registration. So I think we only really need to do one than do the other. But I think what this exercise gives us is you're looking at who's your 25-man squad and who are the younger players that are going to be kept around for that. And I think once we know that, who is available for each type of game, Premier League games, Champions League games, and who's around and who's potentially going to go out on loan, we can make potentially a better decision in the injury scenario analysis. So yeah, let's have a look at the Champions League squad registration. Right, so let's have a quick look at the rules. So you've got the A list, which is no more than 25 players, at least two of whom must be goalkeepers. So we'll work on this list backwards. That's basically what we've got left. And then the rest of it is made up of locally trained players, which is two categories. You've got 4 spaces for club trained players, so players that are on the books 3 entire seasons, or 36 months between the ages of 15 and 21, and Asian trained players who are on the books of another team in the same association, so within the FA basically. So we've got 4 spaces for those. Again, I'll explain this when we put people onto the list. Then you've got the list B. So this is for players who are under 21, as long as they've been eligible to play for the club concerned for any uninterrupted period of 2 years since their 15th birthday. So the important bit here is about the loans. So they can have a maximum of 1 loan period to a club from the same association for a period not longer than 1 year. So that's going to affect a couple of things. So this will be a little bit clearer when we put this onto the chart. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so that sounds pretty complicated, but I think it's a lot easier when we just look at it this way. So obviously the ideal world being that we have a bunch of under 21 players that we can bring through here that are good enough to sort of play, particularly this is with the Champions League, so they're going to be pretty good. And then we've got enough in our association trained, enough in our club trained, that they basically fill gaps. So whatever happens, we can't really have any more than 17 on this list. Yeah, so those 17 plus these 4 plus these 4 makes our 25. We can have as many from the B list as we want, as long as they meet the eligibility criteria. So in that case, what we'll do is we'll work backwards from that, right? So good thing, Tottenham got loads of young talent. Bad thing, they're not all eligible. So Vuskovic and Phillips are not eligible. Vuskovic has obviously just been here, but Phillips, they've both been on loans the last 2 seasons. Yang has not had enough time in the club. Dane Scarlett is eligible. Even though he's had 2 loans, he was at the club for long enough before that to make him eligible. So yeah, and then we've got a couple of people like Bergvall, Gray, and Odebear who have only been with us 1 year, so they're not eligible. So we've got to take one more player out of that. Alfie Dorrington, he is going back out on loan. So out of all of that, that really gives us from the players we've identified, Jamie Donnelly, Alfie Devine, Mikey Moore, and Scarlett and Lancashire to put into there. So for the association trained, these players that we've got who've been trained in the same association, so they met the same sort of club trained rules with their team. But then they've transferred to us. So we've got quite a few of those. Solanke, Baddison, Spence, and Davies. You can put this in any order you want. We've then got Gray, Gibbs, White. I'm assuming that goes through for this purpose. Johnson, and I think Danso for the time he was at Reading. I'm not really sure, though. It doesn't matter for this purpose. So, like I said, you can only have 4 of those spaces. So these 4 players are going to have to move to the next list that they're eligible for. We know that they're not club trained, so they need to be able to be available on the A list. One player who's actually club trained, that's Austin. So that means that these 3 spaces here have to remain unfilled. Okay, so let's put a team on the field, right? So we can use any of these players that we've got here. They're already on the field. But as we go through, let's put a team on the field. So Vicario in goal, Van der Ven Romero starting, Porro and Udogi, Bentancur and Bergvall in central midfield. I've got James Madison over in association trained. We'd have Kudus and Son on the wings. We've got Solanke over in association trained. So that gives us our sort of first 11. So then we're going to need some backups. Well, you've got Spencer Davies. Davies, I suppose, counts as a centre back as well, which might work in his favour. Jed Spence for the right and the left wing. The next person we put in would be Danso as a cover for the central defence. I've put Takai in here. That could be another player. We'll come back to that. And then we need backups for the midfield. So I've put here Basuma and Sarr. I know that Basuma might not be here. Whoever came in would, unless they fitted into club trained, which would be what Ollie skip. Then we need that space for them. Backups for the right wing, Johnson. Backup for the left wing, Tell, and then a backup for the central attacking midfielder, Gibbs White. Backup striker is Richarlison. So that gives us basically a team that we can put on the field. I don't know that it's got the most depth to it, and there's certainly some choices that you might want to make there. So, for example, like I said, would we put someone like Takai here? It's only pre-season. We don't know where everyone's going to be. So just kind of think about that in the same way that you would with Vuskovic. I know that he definitely had a really good sort of start. So it could be there. But with Ben Davies being able to cover the 2 spots, maybe he's a better choice. Archie Gray, where does that leave him? At the minute, I don't know that you can make an argument for him to be in any of the central midfield backup roles. He doesn't fit into any of the other categories. He would not be able to register. Solomon's probably going to be sold. Gill's almost certainly going to be sold. Veliz is back out on loan, probably then getting sold. I put Dragusin and Kulusevski here. They're both injured. It looks unlikely they're going to be ready for the start of the season. There's a re-registration point in January. And yeah, I don't think that they're going to be included. Odebear, I find it hard to make a case for him here. Kinski has to sort of sit outside this. You've got both Vicario and Austin there. Who else would you trade out for that? And then you've got Phillips, Vuskovic, Yang, and Dane Scarlett. So Dane Scarlett didn't appear in the first preseason game. Neither did Yang. Vuskovic obviously sort of put himself out there, but yeah, it's really difficult. So the reason we've gone through this exercise is basically because we need to know who's actually available. Now, the point about all of this is that the Champions League rules are a lot less strict than the Premier League rules. So it might not matter at all, really, because you might have certain players that are registered for the Champions League squad, and but not going out on loan because they are then still available for the Premier League squad. So they're actually still giving you depth. I personally think that what this would suggest would be that one of Donnelly or Devine would go back out on loan. I think Mikey Moore stays. I think having him on the B list is a winger that you've got. You know that he is good, and you know that you're not going to have to take up another space in the A list to be able to use that. I think that means he would stay around. I think they will keep one of Scarlett and Lancashire around. So that gives that depth there. As I say, at the minute, probably what I would do would be to put Archie Gray. Archie Gray can cover both right back and he played centre back, but also for both of the two double pivot midfield slots. So I'd probably put Archie Gray into there, and then again, I think basically everyone else you'd keep around. So I think Ashley Phillips is probably going to go on loan or be sold. I think Odebear potentially, unless he wants to sort of sit as quite deep in the depth chart, I think potentially goes out on loan. And then I think Vuskovic stays around. I think that he's shown enough, even if he's not playing, he's not being used by January. I think he probably finds a loan there. And I think Yang will go back out on loan. Like I said, Scarlett, I really think will go. So that gives us kind of the squad that we can work with, the people that will be available each week. And if someone was to have an injury, who would replace them? What would we do about that? So let's take a look at that. All right, so let's look at that on the field. So let's go through a couple of different scenarios for players being injured and then see what we think we can do about it and what that kind of scenario would leave us to with in terms of depth, right? So a couple of players in different colours here. So these players are the ones that I think are going to go out on loan. I haven't included anyone that I think is going to be sold. And I've put Dragosin and Kulu here in red. They're both injured, so we'll sort of start off with those as injured. So I've just put the first team out on the field. You might disagree with who from that goes into there. Do you play Sarr instead of Bergvall? It shouldn't really matter for the exercise that we're doing. So let's get into that. So first off, going to say nightmare scenario, but potentially likely based on the last couple of seasons, is that we lose three of the back four. So let's take Udogi, Van de Ven, and Romero. And unfortunately, they've all picked up injuries. So the first three players, I think, that come in for those. So we had put Davies as the backup left back. I actually think the first player that comes in is going to be Jed Spence. For him, Kev Danso will come in on the right. Again, the sort of order of some of these players, if you don't agree with those, but it's more about what kind of depth do we think we've got there. So, and before last weekend, that would have worried me. So I've heard a lot of good things about Takai. I've never seen him play. I've never even seen a highlight. But before seeing Vuskovic, one, I thought he was probably going to go out on loan, but actually he looked good. I think I was thinking about him as a sort of younger kid. I know he's 18, but he looked like he could fill a gap. So immediately that puts you into a place where you go, well, okay, we're back with Davies in the centre back role. I don't think that's too much of a bad thing. I think the way that we were playing at the weekend, it wasn't this big high line. So when the forwards were pressing, the centre backs were up on the halfway line. But as soon as that ball was progressing into sort of this area here, we were starting to fall back into a mid block, and as it came past over the half line, we were back into a low block. So you weren't just having the ball here and the centre back still sitting there, and eventually the ball comes over the top and they've got to run back. So I think because of that, they don't need as much speed. So players like Davies and Danso, or really anyone other than Van der Ven, doesn't need quite as much of that huge recovery pace as possible. Also, we were seeing a lot more cover from the double pivot, and definitely we were seeing a lot more cover from the fullbacks. So in this scenario, I think you're probably okay if one of those goes down, and then you're leaning on Vuskovic and you're leaning on Takai. We're not sure if he's still going to be there. That does put you in sort of a bit of a danger zone again. So it'd be nice to say, okay, if we've got those problems, we've got bigger problems than depth, but certainly we're in a better position than we were last year. The cover of Dan, so I think Vuskovic is going to be able to put some cover there. So it means that you're not going to end up with Archie Gray. I also think that the fact that the system we're playing and the fact that we're not going to be just sitting on the halfway line waiting for the defenders to have to sprint back means that even though we have maybe the same sort of players in those positions, that they can actually provide a little bit more depth. So let's then think about some of the sort of attacking problems that we might have. So I know that Solanke was injured last year. The first person at the minute that would come in for him would be Richarlison, although he didn't play at the weekend. So that is, I think, worrying to a lot of people. Richarlison just has not been able to stay fit. And with the rest of the squad there, you're saying, okay, is that Lancashire? So at that point, I actually don't think it is. I think that Thomas Frank might think about putting Matty Tell there. He might think about using Son up the top. And if that did happen, we would then have, if it was Son, we'd have Tell to go there. But we've also got players like Mikey Moore and Brennan Johnson who could cover for that wing spot if they were needed to come in. So again, I think having just Richarlison to back you up is a problem. I'm not that confident that he's gonna go the whole season without getting injured, and you do have a drop off from there. But yeah, we do have some players that can cover. It's not ideal. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. With the wings, we're in a pretty good position. So if there's already an argument to say, does Mohamed Kudus start? I think he does over Brennan Johnson at the minute. I think if he keeps looking sharp the way he was, there's not really a way you can kind of keep him out of the team. But if he was to go down, we've got Brennan Johnson. If Son went out at the minute, that's going to be Matty Tell. If Kudus is still in and Son went down, that's going to be Brennan Johnson. I think all of Thomas Frank's wingers normally play inverted. And I actually think that Brennan Johnson coming in from the right wing with his finishing ability, as long as he's playing that sort of coming in role rather than trying to get round the back and beat his man sort of thing, is essentially something you can do. So yeah, let's say Kudus is out. I've got Brennan Johnson in. So then you're looking at your central midfielders. So first one, let's go for Bentancur getting injured. I think straight away Bissouma comes in here. I actually think Bissouma's going to be stronger in this double pivot than people think he will be. But it looks like the club are looking at moving him on. So let's say that's potentially like a João Palhinha. Is he starting? Is he going to start every single game? But yeah, okay, whoever comes in for that role would be the next person in. Bergvall gets injured. Bergvall was injured last year. So Sarr is going to be the first player that comes in. Again, if you think Sarr's ahead of Bergvall, just flip those around. So once that's happening, you've got two injuries to your midfield. Again, that's leaving you a little bit short. So you're now looking at you're now looking at having two pretty good backups coming in, but the only person that can play for one of those, either in terms of rest or um, uh, in a substitution or anything like that, is Archie Gray. Again, I think Archie Gray is going to fit into this Thomas Frank system a lot better in the midfield than he was before under Ange. I don't think he suited that single pivot role. I don't think any of them did really. Like Basuma has got the press resistance, but he isn't really the defensive, I guess, force in that area. And Gray is probably better defensively, but he doesn't have the press resistance. When they were playing the other day in Reading, we could see that we would have these players coming wide. This was Destiny Doggy coming up a bit further, and this player was splitting, and we were having this player coming down like this. Now, two players here, and potentially you've got your wingers just here, is a much better scenario. One for the goalkeeper breaking out, but two for this player. So the more people that you have around you, where you're not having to make some long pass or try and beat your man, the better it's going to be. So would I worry about Archie Gray going in there? I actually don't think so, but it hasn't been seen, hasn't been proven. So that leaves Archie Gray as the backup. So that's where I guess the next bit would look at. So Morgan Gibbs-White can potentially play in the 8 role. I've heard a lot of people saying that that's potentially where he's better. I just don't think that Thomas Frank is going to play with a 4-3-3. I think if he can be in a 4-2-3-1, he's going to do that. So yes, certainly if you were down to it, and at the minute, if you had the choice between Archie Gray and Gibbs White, if Sarr goes, then yeah, you're probably going to be using Gibbs White. Like I say, I think Archie Gray can thrive in that role. But we've then got the central attacking midfielder. So James Maddison hasn't made it through the last 2 seasons without an injury. So if we were to lose him, I know that we've got Kulu. Kulu isn't fit at the minute, so straight away you say, okay, who's the next guy to come in? So I think that's why we're looking at buying Morgan Gibbs-White or a player like that. If not, I think that you're looking at Jamie Donnelly. I think Jamie Donnelly is going to suit that role really well. At that point, are you worried about depth? Yeah. So I think when we look at this, most positions have got one good backup, and I think I'd be fine with most of those players playing in the Premier League week to week. So if your complete backup squad came in, so let's do that. Let's have Basuma and Sarr. Gibbs White isn't over the line yet, so I'll use Donnelly. If your backup squad was in the game in the Premier League, I think that is still going to be getting you points. One, Thomas Frank putting them in the right positions, not asking them to do things that they can't do. Two, the system being just better set up defensively, so you're not trying to cover so much ground. Would we struggle to score as many goals? Absolutely. Without Dom Solanke, without Kudus, without Son, you're gonna struggle. Without Bentancur, you're gonna struggle with a little bit of thing there. So yeah, I think the sort of squad overall is pretty deep, and the additions of Kudus and Takai, hopefully, but certainly the way Vuskovic was looking, I think Donnelly, the way he was on loan last year, is going to add something there. I think the fact that we've got Jed Spence who can play on both sides. I think the fact that we've got Ben Davies who can play a left back in this system. but can also cover into a centre back in this system. I think the fact that we've got wingers that can play as a striker if they were required to is going to help. And I think the fact that that's why we've got quite so many wingers hanging around. And then you've got some kind of youth players there that aren't going out on loan that I think can definitely come in and do a job. So, Lancashire has shown that he can kind of put the ball in the back of the net. Be interesting to see what he can do with a little bit more time. Mikey Moore again. That I know it's a trade off between going out on loan and getting minutes in your legs, and sort of I guess learning to play like every single week. But personally, I would keep him around. I think he offers a lot of flexibility. For example, you could put Mikey Moore into that slot, and I don't think you're worrying too much. If you were happy to put Donnelly there, I think you're probably happy to put Mikey Moore there. Okay, so I think that's a good place to leave it. I think the squad's in a good place. There's never really much you can do if you're going to get as many injuries as Tottenham had last year. But at the minute, I think the system is in a better place, and I think some of the players that we've got are keeping us in a better place, and it's looking good so far. So, be interesting to see what the next couple of preseason games start looking like as things start ramping up towards that Super Cup game. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and yeah, thanks for watching.